In today's video, I want to show you how you can create custom UIs, custom user interfaces in Hytale. We start with a very basic UI, then go into dynamic text inputs, and then go a step further and do some dynamic displays of value. And at the end of the video, I will show you my finished example of a more complex UI which source code you can find in the description. So let's get started with the basics. So we need to understand the big picture. What is a Hytale UI? So it's just a description of what should appear on screen. It's not code that runs, not pixels that draw, just a description. Hey, put a box here with this text inside. So it means it's declarative. You declare what you want. This is an example of a .ui file. We have a group, we have a label, we have a text. And Hytale figures out how to draw it. So we have two separate worlds. We have the UI files. This is the layout, what appears on screen. We have properties for position, size, colors, and text. And then on the other side, we have the Java code. It's the logic, what happens when you click. We have data, actions, and behavior. And those separate worlds, well, they need to talk. Java needs to talk to the UI file in order to, hey, show this UI, hey, populate those fields. And the UI file has to communicate with the Java code, for example, for events. So we have two directions. We have Java to the UI, hey, display this, load a UI file, update text, show and hide elements, and we have UI to Java. Hey, something happened, a button clicked, a form submitted, or a selection changed. And this is what we want to dive deeper. The UI file knows nothing about your Java code, and the Java code connects to UI elements by their ID. For example, we can define a text button, give it an ID, and this is how Java finds it. So let's summarize the mental model. UI files describe the layout, what to show, and Java code handles logic, what to do. Java to UI, the directional loads files, updates values, and UI to Java show when events and user interactions happen. And with IDs, we can connect those two worlds. So let's go ahead and create our first UI file. So our first UI, we want to display a Hello World dialog using our Hello World page UI file, our Hello World page Java class, and our Hello World command.java to open it. This is the example file structure. We have our Java classes inside our Java packages, and then we need to create a couple of subfolders inside the resources folders. Our Hello World page UI lies in resources, common, UI, custom, pages in exactly this spelling. And this is the location where you need to save your Hello World page.ui. The UI file itself is just an empty container with group. Then we can define properties such as an anchor, which just defines the width and the height, and the background color, which is a hex code with a opacity inside those parentheses. Then I can define a layout mode in which direction the elements inside this group is going to be ordered, and I can create padding, which is like inner spacing. Inside this group, I can create a label, and those elements which is like available inside the UI file from this domain specific language. You see, it's not really JSON, it's not really YAML, it's like a custom domain specific language. Those are built right in to Hytale. And with this label, I can set an ID like hashtag title. This is how we set IDs. Inside those label opened and closed with curly brackets, I can define a text property. In this case, I want to display the string Hello World. I can set an anchor and define a height, and I can define a style. I can define a font size, the text color, and the alignment. So we have different properties that do different things. And I bet in the next couple of weeks, they will be documented more transparently by the Hytale team itself. So let's move to the Java page. We need to start with the class declaration, and we need to extend a class called basic custom UI page. Then we can define our constructor where we pass the player ref to the instance of the custom UI page to the constructor and define a page lifetime. In our case, custom page lifetime dot can dismiss. This just means the player can dismiss the dialog. Then we have a build method we can override. And inside this build method, we get a class called UI command builder. And it just gives us methods to build the UI as it says. And we can use the command.append method. And then we use a relative path to our resources folder. We just created with resources, custom UI pages. We just need pages / our file in order to reference it for the command build. It's like a relative path we pass into the method. So basic custom UI page gives us a simple user interface without event handling. We have the player ref in the constructor, which is the player that is going to see this dialog. We have custom page lifetime, which simply says, hey, when can the player close it? And we have the build method, which is called once and where we load our UI file. We can use a different abstract class called interactive custom UI page for buttons and inputs, but more to that later. In custom page lifetime, we have different values: can't close, can dismiss or close through interaction. So let's go to the command to actually display the dialog. I create a new hello world command, which extends abstract player command, as I have shown you in my last video. We create a constructor where we define in the first parameter our command name, in the second our command description, and in the third a confirmation flag, which we just set to false. Then we override the execute method, which gives us many parameters, just like command context, store, ref, player ref, and world. We need to get a player instance from the store. So I go to the entity store, call the method getComponent, pass in our entity store as a reference, and the player.getComponent type method in order to extract the player instance from the entity store. And then I can create a new instance of our hello world page, pass in the player reference, and then I can get the page manager from the player instance and call open custom page, which takes the entity store ref, the store itself, and the page. I know it gets a little bit confusing with player and player ref and ref. It's just because of the entity component system Hytale uses, which I will explain in the following video. Very important step in your project configuration. When you have like a Gradle, for example, your UI files must be included in a jar. This is how you do it in your Gradle configuration. When you define a tasks.jar method, and on the one side we have this duplicates strategy, which just means, hey, if we have any duplicate files which will happen with your manifest.json, just exclude them, and please bundle everything from source main resources into your group. Into your jar. And inside your manifest.json, you also need to add the property includes asset pack equals true. So Hytale knows, this mod has assets, I need to bundle them in my server files. So this is basically how it all connects. We have a player command hello world, which creates a hello world page, which then calls the build method that loads the UI file and displays it to the player. So let's check it out in IntelliJ. So here's my project, which I will also link in the video description below. And you can also look at my blog article about this video if you want a written version of this video. So I have my tutorial 1 command here, which just extends abstract player command and defines it here. I've just called it tutorial 1 instead, and I will have my tutorial 1 page, which is the basic custom UI page, and we load the tutorial 1 page UI, which is relative to source main resources, common UI custom, then pages tutorial 1 page. IntelliJ sometimes flattens subfolders, so don't be confused. The folder is not called common.ui.custom.pages. It is really 4 different subfolders. So if I open Hytale and type in tutorial 1, I can see my tutorial level 1 UI. Static display, no events, press escape to close. And that is our first UI. So we completed level 1 of this video. We have a .ui file which defines the layout. We have a basic custom UI page that loads the UI. Command.append loads the file and command opens the page via Page Manager. So let's make things a little bit more interesting. We want to add a button and a input. An input. A input? An input? I don't know. I'm German. I only speak the German language. So let's go to events. So we want to extend Hello World page with a text input for the player's name, a button that greets them, and event handling in Java. So we have the following UI file for now. We have our group, we have some properties for the layout, and we have our label title. Now I want to add a text field. And for this to work, I need to import common UI for this text field. So I haven't figured out every aspect of it yet. So it seems that there is like a UI library inside Hytale, which like handles more complex input and UI elements. For example, text field, which is getting referenced by like $C.add text field, and then the name input with a hashtag in front of it, so which defines our ID. And then the same as before, I have an anchor and give it a height and a placeholder text, enter your name, because it's like a text input. I want to display a placeholder. And then I want to define a text button, which somehow isn't included in the common UI, which means we don't need those prefixes with $C. I don't know, but it worked. So I define a text button, give it the ID greet button, and give it a height and a text greet me. So we have our text input, we have our clickable button, which is built in, we have an ID to reference in Java, and our import statement at the top of the file for custom components. Now, one big question arrives. If a user types, for example, Alex into the text field and clicks the button, how does Alex get to your Java code? I mean, the data flow is like user types Alex, and then it goes to those text field name input, and somehow the data travels through the network, and then some magic happens, and hopefully in the future we have like a handle event method where we can like access the data. So what exactly does happen in this in those question mark boxes? So first of all, we need a container. The data arrives as raw bytes. We need a Java object to put it in. So I just define a static class, for example, greet event data, and define a property public string player name. Alex goes in there. It's really simple, but how does Hytale know to put Alex into player name? And that's where the missing link. For simplification purposes, let's just assume Hytale receives like this JSON from the client, player name equals Alex. And my class has this property called player name with a small p. Someone needs to say, hey, take player name from the data and put it in player name. It's a little bit confusing, I know, but stay with me. So that is exactly what a codec does. Codecs are instructions for Hytale. It just means, okay, I define a public static final builder codec, and this class comes from Hytale. Pass the class, which like is our container, and I want to tell Hytale how to create a new greet event data and how to fill in each field. And we start by telling Hytale the class and how to create it. So I use those helper methods, builderCodec.builder, and then I pass in the class of our container object and the reference of the new method. So like, how do I want Hytale to instantiate this greet event data class? And then I call .build to build a builder codec. Next, I want to add a field mapping. I do this with the .append and .add method after that, which just basically says, hey, when you see add player name, please put it in the property player name. So let's deconstruct this code step by step. I have my builder, which just says, hey, this codec is for greet event data, and please create new instances with new greet event data. And then I have the field mapping, which just says, hey, this field called add player name, this is a string. Please handle this as a string. Then I have a setter, which just says, okay, how do you set the object? In this case, we have like the object reference, and well, that stands for value. This is like the actual string that gets passed from the client. And I say, okay, when you receive this value, please populate it in object.playerName. This is also why we made it static. And when I want to get the field, read it from object.playerName. So we have keyed codec, hey, look for add player name, it's a string. We have a setter, put the value in object.playerName, and a getter, read the value from object.playerName. And those are lambdas, what we see. It's just a shorthand syntax for defining functions in Java. And we have two lambdas because we want to define the direction from data to object for receiving events, and from object to data for sending updates. And for events, the setter is the important one. So why the add prefix, you might ask? Why add player name and not just player name? So when we have just a regular player name as a key, it's just a regular value which we set manually. But if we use add player name, we bind it to the UI, and Hytale reads it from an input. So the add basically says, hey, get this value from the UI element I specify later. And this is our complete event data class. And now Hytale knows how to turn network data into your Java object. So let's take this and upgrade our Java page. First of all, we need to change the base class to interactive custom UI page with the greet event data. And now we need to implement the build method. And inside the build method, we can add event bindings after our appending. And after that, I know it gets a little bit out of frame. I don't think I can move it. No, I can't. And we have handle data event, which gets called when the data actually arrives our class. So let's deconstruct it step by step. We have event binding, which basically says, hey, hashtag name input dot value. This is our text field. Get the value property of element with ID name input. Get the target element by ID and add a new event data. So event data is different from greet event data. So this is like a Hytale class, which says, okay, we want to append into the variable add player name the value we get from the text input with the ID name input, and we can like access the property dot value. Maybe it's familiar for some of you which have like done basic web development. So we can say, okay, when this button is clicked, when this specific greet button is clicked, hey, please create a new event data and append player name from name input dot value. So a player clicks greet button, Hytale reads name input dot value, it deserializes into greet event data, and handle data event receives the data. So I will show you the method in just a minute. So when we want to do interactive UIs, we need interactive custom UI page. We need a codec. So that's the most important thing. So let's jump straight into the code, and inside tutorial 2 page, I will show you we have this codec, for example, like the greet event data with our player name. And we have our codec, which just tells Hytale how to create a greet event instance and how to fill in the player name from the field. So when I go below, we have our add event binding, which just says, okay, when the user is clicked, this greet button, please append this variable from the value which is in the text input. And handle data event is a method I will override as well. We get the entity store as ref, as store, and the data. So this is why we have to pass it in here as a generic. So Hytale knows, okay, with which data it has to operate. And here I can get the player as usual. I will get the data from the form. So because greet event data is being passed, I can access the player name. And we could use a getter and setter, but I haven't really tried that. So I don't know if that is best practice, because in Java typically you make properties private, but I haven't figured out yet if that works or if it's like by design in the reference files I found in the server. So I will check that out later. So I will check, hey, is just a little sanity check, is player name set? If so, use the player name, otherwise use a default value stranger. And then I send a message to the user with the player ref, send message, message.raw, it's like a wrapper method to display values, and I just concatenate a new string, hello, name. And then I get the page manager from the player and set page to none, which simply closes the page. And now we have like everything in the page. We have our greet event data, which just says, hey, which data do we have to work? We have our build method, which just says, hey, build our UI and add an event binding. And this is called automatically because of the override method. Hey, what happens when somebody clicks on the event and on greet event data? And then I can like choose, okay, what do I want to do? What do I want to act on? In this case, we only have one event. And now I can show you the page UI. This is relatively simple. I just added some styles to that. You can get it in the description below. We have our inputs, we have our groups, we have our title. I've added the subtitle and the text button. So if I go to Hytale and type in /tutorial2, we get our title, our subtitle, our text input. I will say Alex, enter your name Alex. I'm not Alex, but let's just pretend I am, and click on greet me. And as you can see in the chat, it says, hello, Alex. So we completed level 2. We have text fields for text input. We have text buttons for clickable buttons. We have interactive custom UI pages for events. And the add prefix binds UI values to event data, and handle data event receives the data. So I just shown you the demo, but you know what? We should really figure out how dynamic values work, because, you know, sending data from the UI to Java is cool. But how do we do it the other way around? How do we send data from Java to the UI? So for this, we want to create a styled info panel that displays server statistics from Java, a proper layout with a sidebar, and custom button styles. So the problem, level 2 reads from the UI. But what if we want to write to the UI? So from Java to the labels. We can use a method called .set to update UI elements dynamically. We can call it like that. We pass in an element ID, which is just the element IDs in the UI file, which property we want to change. In most times we want to change text, but we could also change other values, I guess, like color. And we can pass in the value, which must be a string. For example, we can append a UI file called info panel and set the value of a label with the ID stat1 value, and set the property of this label to the string value of players online, which is a variable you may define earlier in the code. Really important, numbers must be converted with string.valueOf. So for example, let's take our tutorial 3 page, which extends interactive custom UI page with my custom close event data this time. I will show you that in just a minute. I will define some properties like players online, quest count, and uptime. I will define a constructor just like before and pass in my values, the player ref, the custom page lifetime, and the close event data codec to the super constructor, and define my other properties from the constructor from my tutorial 3 page. So extend, store the data, and define a constructor. And we need to hard code lifetime. We should not pass it as a parameter, because when I did that, Hytale crashed. So I didn't know if that is intended or not. So please don't just do that. So the close event data is really just a empty codec. So we don't have any input data to read. So we just define a builder codec with like close event data as a class, but it's really just an empty class with like this builder codec. So we have no append calls, just an empty codec, but it's still required. So the build method is as follows. We have like the command builder where we append our tutorial free page UI. We set our values, which we will define in the UI file in just a bit. And then we add a event binding to activating and to the close button. So that's everything we need to do. Load the UI file, set each stat with command set, and bind the close button. So handle data event is relatively simple. We just get the player as before and just set the page to page none in order to close the page. So that's really it. So our layout begins with a group. And in the group, we define our width and the layout mode. And this time we use layout mode left to align items from left to right. I define two groups, one group called left panel, which gets a width of 150 pixels and a background color with a slight opacity. And I define group right panel, which gets the property flex weight equals 1, which just means, hey, we have 500 pixels width in our group container, and left panel takes 150 pixels. Right panel should take the remaining 350 pixels. It comes, I think, from Flexbox and CSS styling. So it should be familiar for web developers. So that is basically our UI. And then I define another group inside the right panel and call it stats grid. I also define layout mode left, give it an anchor, a height, and inside that group I define yet another 3 groups with flex weight equals 1, which means, hey, please evenly distribute the width along those groups. So every group with label stat value takes 1/3 of the available width. And then I can also define like custom bottom styles. In this case, I can save it as a variable and just pass it to the style property in the close button below. So I can create reusable styles, and I think you can import it from other classes to like define your own UI components, your own UI library, and so on and so forth. So let's check it out in IntelliJ. So here is tutorial free page. And if you want to look at closer, you can go to the YouTube video description and open up the GitHub repository. So we have interactive custom UI page. We have close event data, which is an empty codec. We have the constructor, where we pass all the relevant parameters to the constructor, which is needed by interactive custom UI page. And then we define our own properties, just like players online, quest count, and uptime. And then we have our build method, which just appends the page tutorial free page. We set the values of the free labels and add the event binding. And over here, we just add the event handler to close the page. In tutorial free command, I have an abstract player command, tutorial free. And here I create a new tutorial free page and just pass in the values hard-coded. We have 42 players online, 7 quest count, and 3 hours, 24 minutes uptime. So those are fake numbers, but you can retrieve them from anywhere, from a database, from a JSON file, from Hytale methods itself. There are virtually no limitations. And in tutorial free page, I have my close button style at the top. I have my group, which is like, as you can see, at the top of everything, like of literally everything. I have my left panel. I have my label in the left panel. And then I have my different groups in the left panel. I have added some labels for a sidebar, dashboard, settings, and about. And inside my right panel, I have the groups as here, like stats grid. I know it's a bit more complex than I have shown in the slides, because it would be tedious to just like do it step by step when you can look at it yourself in the GitHub repository. So please check out the GitHub repository to get it fully working. And here I have my group stats grid, which contains all the other groups. Here, group 1, group 2, and group 3. I think you can maybe extract those as custom components, but I haven't tried that yet. So when I go to Hytale and enter tutorial 3, I get this very sexy looking dialog with like this left sidebar with a title with my menus, which aren't working right now. I get this title, I get this this little separation thingy, I get a label, and now, as you can see, I have different colors for my different stats. I have players, quest, uptime in blue, green, and orange, yellowish. So I can close it, and I can open it up again, and that's basically all there is to know. Well, I think that's not all there is to know, but all that I know about custom UIs in Hytale. And if you want to learn how to make more complex UIs, please check out my whitelist manager plugin, which is available on GitHub. I have implemented a scroll bar inside this manager plugin. You can remove players, and here on the bottom you would see pending requests of players that want to join your server that aren't on the whitelist, and you can enable the whitelist, and then you see the status property changes instantly from enabled to disabled, and in the chat we can see a text message. So yeah, the code is in the description. Please like and subscribe and give me ideas of what you want to see next. So thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.